With me is Ed Mastronardi, who's coming back to this area for the first time since 1951. And Ed, what was it like for you guys before you came into the line here?
And then, my God, that's when we spotted the tanks. And they started shelling the wire. And what the sound is, you never forget it, it's bang. If you hear the bang, you're fine. If you don't hear the bang, you're dead. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, it sounds no. But like, you have to fit bang.
Okay, this is an interview with Ed Mastronardi, who was a lieutenant in the 2nd Battalion, Royal Canadian Regiment in Korea in 1951. He was one of the 2nd Battalions, which is the volunteer units that went over to fight in the Korean War. And Ed was particularly involved in the Battle of Song Gok Spur, which is Hill 187 on the 2nd of November 1951, which was his birthday.
When they before they hit me, they started hitting me and they yelled back. They yelled at us. I think Duncan McMillan got a bit wrong. He said, "Canada boy, you die tonight." What they actually said was same word. "Canada boy, tonight you die." Far more draggy. And I yelled back in a typical John Wayne fashion, "Come and get us, you sons of bitches."
That was on the 14th, or was that on the...
No, that's the big one.
That's the big one.
That's the big one. Oh yeah, that's the big one.
He was in an outlying post on a knoll on the end of the spur called the Song Gok. And one night his platoon was attacked by 800 Chinese, which overran his position.
One was blowing a bugle. 3 ran up to my command post. And I was standing on the parapet. And I took them out. Bang, bang, bang. 2 with my Browning, and it was empty, and with my very pistol I hit the 3rd one.
And Ed held them back. They lost 1 man killed, no prisoners, and they held off the whole battalion. It's one of the top actions ever fought by the RCRs in their entire history. And he won a Military Cross for it, but I think he should have won a Victoria Cross for it. The In Korea show was quite different than anything else we had. First of all, history gave us 3 hours, where they only gave us 6 hours for the entire Second World War, which is really ridiculous. And when we got it, where were the battlefields? You're starting to wonder whether they're all going to be in the joint security area, which means you're going to be standing at a barbed wire fence the whole time, pointing out through the barbed wire. So we found Capillon, and then we had to find a veteran. And when you go and do these guys, you realize only half of them got involved in the fighting of the Patricias. Only 2 companies were involved. Same thing for Ed. For Ed, we're talking 1 platoon of the RCR. 1 platoon. We're talking 30 guys. So out of the 650 guys in the regiment, you got to find one of those 30. And we found Ed. He was living in Ottawa. And he wasn't mentioned in any of the history books, the War Patrols, all these books that had come out. And they hadn't found Ed Mastronardi. It was based on a story that came out of the KVA, which is the Korean Veterans Association, and it was Canada boy, tonight you die. That's it. They're calling through the wire at the Canadians. There's only 29 of them, and these guys are going to come and take them out. And of course, Ed, being the cowboy that he was, says, "Come on in." Also, you're also looking for veterans that are going to give you color. So I was calling a lot of guys up and just talking to them about artillery, whatever they were up to. And I got the number for Ed Mastronardi. There's not very many Mastronardis in the phone book. So I called him up, and he was living probably 10 minutes from where I lived. And I talked to him at length. And this guy was a very, very bright guy. He was an aeronautical engineer. He was a tailback for the Varsity Blues. He was the assistant to the Treasury Board, and that was his final job. This guy was like a brilliant, brilliant individual. But his memory was absolutely phenomenal. And I have never had an interview like that before or since, and you're there with him. And I arranged to go and film him, because I talked to him at length, and it was obviously superb. It was a superb interview over the phone. So when I told him we'd be coming with a camera to record him as a preliminary, he got all excited, and he greeted us at the door. We go in, we set up. His wife gives us a cup of coffee, and he's ready. He's got his palette out there where he's gonna do his little drawings. He's got this event shaped his life, and even to the day he died, it shaped his life. And so he was going through it. he talks about a single tree here and this, and he's talked about how he shot the bugle, and then he grabbed the burp gun, and he was able to recount the whole thing in just incredible detail. Plus, he knew the overall picture because he's a very bright guy. And when the attack on the Song Gok takes place, he carries you right all the way through. He's even changing the clip on his pistol when he's explaining it to you. But I figured we counted, he had killed, shot directly himself, about 12 Chinese who were attacking. He also almost has some humor about it with the anti-tank weapons. And then he calls in the barrage. He calls in the barrage to box him out so he can get it. And I remember him saying to me afterwards, he said, Norm, I felt like God because the shells were all coming in around him. And it was absolutely magnificent action. And Ed was the complete cowboy. Ed's the guy who loved it. He's the guy who loved every part of it. His men responded to him. They called him the boss. He was an expert pistol shot. He was a scoundrel of all forms. He was a rogue. And of course, he was the one, and that sort of guy are the ones that win you wars.
When they before they hit me, they started hitting me, and they yelled back. They yelled at us. I think Duncan McMillan got a bit wrong. He said, "Canada boy, you die tonight." That's what they actually said, but same word. "Canada boy, tonight you die." Far more draggy. And I yelled back in a typical John Wayne fashion, "Come and get us, you sons of bitches."
That was on the 14th, or was that on the?
No, that's the big one.
That's the big one.
That's the big one. Oh yeah, that's the big one.
But this was a really interesting interview. I had several other with him. We did take him back to Korea. As with the other guys, it was the first time they had ever been back. I actually interviewed a guy from who became a general with the 2nd Van Dues, who was out in no man's land during the attack. And he said, we saw the Chinese coming because they had tanks and they were going to hit somebody, he said. They're going to hit them hard. And of course, they couldn't do anything because there was only 4 of them on the patrol, and they hit. That's the group that hit Mastronardi. And I always remember he said, and they put up a hell of a fight because basically they fought the Chinese to a standstill. There's one part where he talks about the chalk. He said when we looked at the Americans, he said you could see the chalk on their helmets, and you're going, what are you talking about? Well, when they got off the boat at Incheon, to count them, they would chalk them, so they would have white chalk on their helmets as they went. And these guys were so green that when they got involved in these actions, these Americans, they were still they still had chalk on their helmets. This guy he loved it. He just absolutely loved being in the war. He loved his purpose. I mean, it was like I said to him, you liked it. And he said, well, I liked it, but not everybody did. The segments using Ed in Korea are quite small. They're still very, very poignant. They're very, very powerful. He's talking about shooting guys. He's talking about shooting his own guys. He's talking about grabbing the Chinese out of their foxholes where they're eating their rice because they can smell the garlic. He's talking about sights and sounds and smells and personalities, right down to just the most minute detail. Ed was absolutely brilliant. But what you get with some of these people is they're the war lovers. They have an affinity for war. And they see things that other people don't see, like the platoon commanders that were good, or the aces. They all have special senses. So it could be eyes, it could be smell, it could be something. They have something going with them. And they go to danger, not run from it. And that's the big thing. And you see that even today with some of the stuff that goes on. Some people will go towards the danger to extinguish it. Others will run from it. And of course, one is a very small percentage of people. You're looking at the heroes. These are the war heroes that you need to win the war. And when you see them, I recognize them. It's usually their stare or their confidence. There's something about them that is very, very, very strong. And you can see that they're the ones you'd follow. His action is really a minor action that takes place. It's a Canadian platoon versus a Chinese battalion, which is about 800 men versus basically 30 men. And it's a night attack meant to take over this position that's at the end of a spur running up to Hill 187. So this is a strategic point. So the idea is if they can break through at the base of the spur where Ed is entrenched, they can push up the spur and then continue their attack. At this phase of the war, ground still could be lost or gained, whereas later it was never lost or gained. So it still matters. It's still strategically important. That's why he's talking about taking the fight, and he gets Big Sunray on the radio. Big Sunray is Rockingham. He's the brigadier. He says, Ed, you're the cork in the bottle. You gotta stick in there. And Ed says, yes, sir. He's going to Rockingham, Big Sunray. And of course, we got to stay. Then later on, they're starting to get overwhelmed. So he's going to box them out. And he does a magnificent job. And this is like, you're only talking one guy killed, a few wounded. And I don't know how many Chinese bodies they counted. The Chinese like to take their bodies away, but they just stopped them cold. And this is the story of the Canadians in Korea to some extent, because at Kapyong, at the Saddle, Canadian casualties were very, very low, and they achieved wonderful results. Kapyong is one of the most brilliant battles fought, period, and they only had 10 guys killed.
What are the casualties here, though? This is the first time you're really taking war-style casualties, isn't it?
Well, that's right. There was 6 killed and 30 wounded, which was not small peanuts. Amongst the wounded, two officers wounded, and one of them being both. And so that's there was no involvement for the Filipino battalion, which had been attached to us, or the Archers are at this point. A regimental combat team that took over from us did get the hill. And we went into reserve, and then from then we moved up to the. There was a lot of moving. We were going to be with the 25th Infantry Division. We were going to be with the 1st Cav Division. So we moved back and forth. It was rather disorganized. And then finally, we moved up to Charwan, and we were actually on the high ground south of the city. The Royal 22nd. I'm trying to remember whether they were right or left. I believe they were left, and. That became a month of patrolling, and that kept me really busy. But there were 2 types of patrol: the major patrols with like company strength with artillery and tanks, and then there was my patrols to identify where the enemy positions were, how strong they were, etc.
But where were you located?
Well, for that action I was with the CO.
Right.
Because my job was to digest the information, keep them posted, and also
So you
and to
scouted
protect them,
the pre part of it, too.
because he was wandering all over the place, and also to protect them. We had quite a relationship, Bob Keane and I, but I guess I was a bit of a headache sometimes, but I really admired him. And you consider, after all, he'd commanded a special services group in the Second War, that the combined American-Canadian effort. He'd been involved in that. And then he commanded the Lake Superior Regiment after that and saw a lot of action. He got a well-earned DSO. But he was hard, but fair. And
Did he inspire confidence?
oh yes. When I got hit at the outpost the first time, my company commander wasn't there. He was, I don't know what, he was on doing something. The 2IC was in charge, and he wasn't really that experienced in fighting. He'd been in the war, Second War, but I don't think he'd seen a lot of action. So we were hit, that's the 14th of October, we were hit by a company probing attack, and that lasted, I lost a couple of men, but we beat them off. But he didn't let the CO know what was happening. And Keane was really angry about that, because he wanted to be kept informed. And so when I got hit the second time, on my birthday, 2nd of November, Keane took over, and with Midland. But he got right in the middle of it, and of course Rockingham.
Did he remove the other officer?
Sort of.
Bypass.
Sort of. But It could have been a disaster if we hadn't been able to. But don't forget, I had a hell of a fine platoon. Those guys. You're not going to move them off very easily. But we lost them. The two badly wounded, and but it was great experience because we knew where the weaknesses were in the position. And for the next 2 weeks, we really shored it up. We took up a line, I don't know, a couple of miles ahead of the Indian River, because getting ready in the position for the attack on the Chinese Winter Line, or what became the Jamestown Line. Our objective was going to be 187. There were two 187. Patricia's had one, and we had the other. We were to pass through the Royal Ulsters. They were going to hold our start line. The object was to get the Chinese Winter Line, which was went along the Samachon Valley. Everybody's moving. The Americans are moving. The Rocks are moving, and we're all starting on this broad front. So we were held. We were held there for a relatively short time, only a matter of days, really. I think we launched commando around October the 3rd, if I remember correctly. Our job was to sweep over the crest of 187 and onto the huge ridge called the Brown Bastard. Called the Brown Bastard because it had been napalm so much it just looked like a great big brown ridge. And then I think it was Charlie Company were coming up on the other side, and they were to occupy the crest of 187 and down the forward side. And then once we got onto the ridge, we started digging in, and a decision was made to put a outpost platoon on the Song Gok Spur, or the Song Gok Ridge, which is quite down into the Samachon Valley. The first platoon was 3 platoon commanded by a Sergeant Jim Woods, the Woods I talked about at Shalee, who took over the platoon. A hell of a fine soldier. Great drinker, but a good soldier. He started digging in, and there was a lot of activity. He did a lot of activity out here. Initially, they put 4 men on the pimple, and then he strung the rest of the platoon out around it, roughly where you see it here. He was only there about 2 days, and he got hit, and they took out the 4 men. So it was decided not to man the pimple. They would booby trap it and eventually mine it with booby trap and also have it as a defensive fire task. The idea was that you had a platoon occupy the outpost for it was supposed to be 1 week and then off 2 weeks. But we were very short of officers. At the time, we only had 2 lieutenants then. My platoon was me, and 1 platoon. So I was on there at around the October 14th period, and I relieved Jim. And as I say, we weren't going to man that, but what we did, we booby trapped it.
Now you booby trapped it with mines, or did you actually have a fuse?
Well, shall I booby trap it? Remember I told you about what a good platoon that should be able to do? That's bold, innovative, and decisive. That's Aussie Gillette using ration tins, sea ration tins, those stakes from beer boxes. You get a 36 grenade, and you pull the pin, slip it into the can. You have to put it in the ground, okay? You put it in the ground, and then stick the end of the wire. And then you take your grenade, and you attach the wire, put it into the tin, press it carefully, and so that the handle is pressing against the side of the tin.
Keep it in place.
That's right, and you trip it, and kaboom. That's.
So what sort of detonator would you change?
What's the usual detonator?
5 seconds or 3 seconds?
The short one, 4 seconds. 7 second was training, and 4 second, I believe, was 4 second. That's all. And I can tell you, when throwing a grenade, so that you wouldn't get to throw back, Because we threw 350 grenades, and I threw a lot of grenades because of my football background training. I could throw grenades further than the rest of the guys. So I used to throw them like a sparrow. None of this lob crap, you know. Just do it like I was doing a forward pass. I could hurl the thing over 50, you know, 30 yards, 40 yards that way. And but I'd let the handle go. I'd count 1,000, 2,000, let it go, so that little couldn't shoot it back at me again. You see.
You're booby trapping this with your little sticks.
That's right, just where you saw
Tins, jam tins.
That's right.
And then you're going to what? String barbed wire?
Oh, yeah, Jim had started that. We kept it up, and the guys were bitching about it. You know, oh, it hurt. Sure. Oh yeah, because you know that's really nasty work. Really nasty work. We heard noise on on the 14th of October.
So you're just really
We just
occupying
had a
these
few.
positions.
You know, we had medium machine gun fire on both flanks. The machine guns were back here from Kit Lane, Sergeant Lane's machine platoon. And so George reported a lot of movement here. And this is where they launched their attack on the main attack on the 14th. And that's where you saw those casualties, the guy with the head blown off and all that sort of stuff there. That happened on that thing.
So this is, but what time is this? About 1 o'clock in the morning?
Midnight, around midnight.
So
Midnight.
it's
Around
just-
midnight. We heard them moving in around 11ish, but they didn't assault until midnight. And
So are you firing a lot of flares at this time, or?
oh yeah, and my 60 millimeter motor, which was working then, it flared up. I moved a second Bren over there. Once we detected with the remainder of it, but it wasn't the same kind of massive whistle blowing bugle. There were some whistles. Well, not like it was on when they hit with the battalion. So we figured it was about a company strength hit.
So what can you see? You can hear the stuff going on.
You can hear, and you don't see a hell of a lot, not till they get up real close. I was busy calling because we didn't have all the preset DF tasks here. I was calling down the artillery to the forward observation officer. I was calling the artillery down here and also here, because I thought that sure as hell that's where they're going to come. I always figured that was more sensitive because they could they sort of overlooked us in a way from that pimple. We never expected they would come here, which they did finally. But on this attack, so this main thing was here, and this is where it lasted about a couple of hours, and then they pulled off, and we could hear moaning, the wounded. They picked up as many of the wounded they could, and below the bottom of the hill here, near the paddy fields, later on we found a cave, all kinds of bloody bandages and what have you. So we must have hit quite a few of them. But we were good at taking their people out. You know, they didn't just leave them there. They take them out. So that was really that effort. They left quite a few.
Was there any artillery with this from the Chinese, or was it basically
No, mortars.
intrigue?
Mortars, but no heavy artillery.
Okay.
This is supposed to be a surprise attack, a sneak attack. That's why there wasn't been making that much noise. So so Janes took most of the strain. He did a very fine job on that. And Harry Sillaby, my corporal from Brentford, a fine corporal too. Anyway, so that was the main effort. We had some backing from Jack, but that was mainly Sillaby and Janes. So we beat that off, and as I told you, I was, and the CO wasn't even informed we were in the middle of it.
And you lost two killed in this, or
2 wounded.
2 wounded? Okay.
Yeah, 2 wounded.
So that's really quite.
So, but
good.
we nailed at least a dozen of them and more because of all the bloody stuff we saw later on.
So after this now, are you being warned that the Chinese are going to try something?
No. Okay, when we finished that, we went back to the main position, rotated again shortly after that.
Now, are you putting minefields in as well?
Not yet. The Americans were doing minefields. This is an unoccupied ridge here. They were moving a minefield coming this way. They hadn't come hit our front, our part of the front yet. But we knew they were suddenly these jump lines that they had.
Oh, those bouncing betties.
They hadn't hit us, go close to us. They had got this far the night of the 1st of November. They had just gotten as far as this ridge, and they were supposed to on the following day cover us. So, but anyways, Jim came back out again, and he started reporting beaucoup activity back there. And so they decided to, anyways, about the 30th of October, they decided, and I think it was a Medlin's decision, and I think Keane had a hand in it, decided to send me back out. Because quite frankly, I had one of the best platoons in the battalion, without any doubt.
Now, why did they feel the need to hold this position?
Okay, again, this was to blunt any major attack. The whole idea was, it was sacrificial, and we knew this. It was something like in the First War, when the guys were moving the line and they were mining underneath.
Yeah.
You just hope, but you weren't the guy that was there when when you couldn't hear the noise anymore. Yeah. Well, it's no different kind of feeling, you know. Of course.
You're on your own.
So, anyways, when I went out and I saw Jim, was he ever glad to see me? He said, it's going to be rough around here, and because you could hear at night. He was reporting. You could hear they were shooting huge chandelier flares. You could hear trucks and tanks moving up behind the hill, the noise in the valley. There weren't any probing yet there, because they knew it. They'd been around the bloody place a number of times. Oh, incidentally, on the 14th, they had cut my wire. So they knew automatically if they're going to come in to cut the wire. You go out automatically on your 88 set, your RT. That was the drill. So anyhow.
So now it's your birthday.
Not quite yet. And then I can remember the night before, the night of the 1st, and I could see all this stuff going on, and I was reporting it back to Medlin. And I had my signaler, Bob Kirkpatrick, and I can remember saying to him, Kirk, some poor son of a bitch is going to get it. And I didn't really dream it was going to be us. I thought it might be some place of hoping. Anyway, somebody on the front. Well, then on the morning of the 2nd, I was called to an old group back at the company headquarters, and they'd been informed there was something really big building up back there, and they were getting it from other intelligence sources, and to be on full alert on this. We weren't quite sure where they're going to hit, and so I went back, and to shave. I went down here, and it was on this part. I'm sorry, here, because this is an unoccupied ridge. There was a little creek, and there used to be a village around here, small village. So I was just starting to shave, and bing, an artillery shoot, Chinese artillery shoot. And in fact, it hit close enough that knocked me ass over tea kettle. With no shrapnel, but I kept freeing myself out. There were guys who were worried, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." That was the end of my shaving. And so, anyways, I came back up, and then, my God, that's when we started the tanks. And I had the wiring parties out going like crazy out here, so they started firing. And
is this it's still daylight then? Is it?
Oh
Dusk.
Oh yeah. This is daylight. Yeah, and we didn't get an airstrike in because they were busy. There was something going on the right flank, and they were well away from us. They were preoccupied there. They just moved them up, and they started shelling the wire. And what the sound is, it's you never forget it. It's bang. There's a shell.
The high velocity shells.
If you hear the bang, you're fine. If you don't hear the bang, you're dead. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, it sounds but like the fit bang.
So what are you thinking at this point?
Well, why?
Yeah, why me, Lord?
But any event, I still had hopes, you know, still had hopes. And so I pulled the guys back on the reverse slope because they weren't using artillery then, they were just using the tank fire. Then, of course, they only did that for maybe half an hour, and they were going to stay there too long because they knew the air would come in. Eventually, we were going to get air because I had reported all this stuff. But there was a priority, you know, and this outpost was not a big priority in the big scheme of things. So, anyways, but then as I say, the night before, I had all this activity going on, so we knew there was going to be a big hit someplace. So, around 6-ish of the 2nd of November, I called. I had my bunker was down here, and I called my corporals in. I had saved some beer, Asahi Japanese beer, to have a drink for the old man, for the boss used to call me, the boss's birthday. So we just finished that, and it was about, I guess about 7:30, getting on to 8-ish. And Jack moved out to go back to his position, and then he saw this massive Chinese moving up on the unoccupied ridge. He ran back into my bunker. The other 2 corporals were still with me. He said, "They're coming." He said, "They're going up the ridge behind us." And then we heard the mines go off. They hit the mines. They ran right through the mines. Because they were moving to get in behind here and to take a crack here. But the main crack was here. They decided they wanted to cut us off from the rest of the battalion. So I rushed up to I set the other 2 corporals. They ran back to their Syllaby and Jane ran back to their positions. I went up to my command post, and I sit there for a minute. Sort of like almost suspended animation. "Are you all right, boss?" Kirkpatrick, my signaler. "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine." I said, "Kirk, it's us." And that's what it started. And then, we had all these DF tasks in. And the closest I have seen in drawing, and Ted Zuger did this. I saw it at some publication someplace. The closest I've seen to what it looks like in real life. There. That's about as close as I've seen. I think my effort was one of the things that inspired that painting, to be honest with you. He's much said that when I met with him once. But that gives you, that's about as, and that's about the capture, the chaos, the noise, the only thing it doesn't do is all the acrid smoke from their fire and our fire.
Smells.
You can hardly breathe. Yeah, and it's so thick. And of course the dust, the dirt from the ground, from the explosions. But that's pretty close. So that's pretty close. That's pretty close. So then realizing that, when they were hitting that and moving here, Jack was alerted. So as soon as he reported they were moving in behind, that's when I started calling these tasks. The Foo moved up with Medlin, and so I was relaying the task requirements to him and he to the guns. By then we had about a battery supporting us, which built up from a battery, built up to the regiment, and before it was over, the division. And before it was all over, I was actually giving orders for a Victor target 72 guns, hammering at the various spots around the position. Otherwise, we never would have survived. It would have been impossible for 28 guys to survive a thing like that. So, I owe one to the artillery, no question about that. Matter of fact, after it was all over, they sent something up. They wanted to see what it was like, and I actually could show them. There was where the Chinese lying around where one of their shells landed. They'd never seen that before. I'd were four of them, almost like at right angle corners, lying there, and I left them there until Padre Durnford, the division padre, ordered me to bury them. He said, you should bury those people. I said, but they're serving a useful purpose. See the first chairman, second chairman, that gets me to the minefield. I said, they're serving a purpose.
Well, you can
here.
step on it.
So I said, that's not right. That wasn't right. That we had quite a cemetery, as a matter of fact.
So now you know it's you.
Oh yeah, it's me. And the platoons are far apart. I mean, you don't know what's going on. Never mind in other companies. You don't even know what's going on in your own company, other platoons. You're spread out so well, look, there's a platoon here. A platoon over here. You ever see them? They don't see you. You're over 1,000 yards away from you. Here, we never no interaction across the valley there with them. So it's just you. And if once they break through there's nothing to stop them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they
There's
they
nothing to
roll
stop
up.
them.
They roll up the whole.
That's
thing.
right. They roll up the whole thing. And that's what they were. That's what they deduced later on. That's what they deduced.
So you heard the minefields are going off here.
Going off here. That's right. And then there was the going off here, and then Jack Sargent reported coming in behind him, cutting us off completely off from our company position here. So then I called on, and then there was a movement here, but not the same as it was here. So I called on this fire task and that fire task. This one was quite successful. They didn't hit there. I don't believe they hit there again. They probed. They came through here later. They blew a hole in a wire here because one was blowing a bugle. 3 ran up to my command post, and I was standing on the parapet, and I took them out. Bang, bang, bang. 2 with my Browning, and it was empty, and with my very pistol I hit the 3rd one, right on the lips of my command post. So that stopped that part of it. A bugler also was shot, and we got the bugle the next day. I gave it to the regiment, and then the Janes wasn't getting too much activity this time because they had taken they were afraid of I believe of something coming from here. They knew this was manned. I mean, they weren't stupid, so they weren't doing very much here. The concentration was fore and aft of the position. So then, so we're getting now. This is about I guess we're talking about 11 o'clock at night, and they still. And then around midnight, I could hear this tunneling across the valley. I said, Jesus, this is one of the bloody tanks over, I thought. As it turned out, it was a self-propelled gun, not a tank. And it was blasting away at the wire here, sitting on the offset. They had manned at least 4 machine guns here, firing on this. So I sent my rocket launcher team. I said, here's your big chance, guys. You've been carrying the damn thing around all this time. Here's your chance to shoot. I said, look, but once you shoot, move away, because they such a flash. God, they were keen as mustard. Up they ran. And I was watching them, because my God, they fired and they missed. And they were so amazed, so they didn't move fast enough and fired. And fortunately, they weren't killed. They were wounded. But I sent people out and brought them back in. They weren't in very particularly good shape. And I had a sort of a holding place back here for casualties. So after that, it trundled back from whence it came. We didn't get it. But I was disappointed, pity, after all that work, those guys carried that weapon. As I told you, after the second bomb, the mortar had went kaput. And and I reported that. I had my flares. I only had so many flares, but that's the only way we could see anything.
What's the noise? What are you hearing? Can you actually tell if they're coming from over here or over there, or is everything?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, the firing. Well, they were getting ready for an assault here. That was sort of obvious because of the heavy firing and artillery firing coming in. Of course, we were firing too. I moved down just shortly after midnight. I moved down here with Sillaby, and that's when I started throwing the grenades. Oh yeah, the old football, throwing the grenade. Because I could get into this depression. You see, they couldn't throw that far. They were good, but they couldn't throw as far as it needed to go. And here you see there's a command post, and they were moving down here underneath their machine guns. So it was to get the grenades there. So I tossed a flock of them. And my signaler always staying close to me. And then I moved back to the command post. Jack was getting hit. He was getting hit about shortly after. So I jitterbugged my way, because there was lots of fire, over to his position, and he was running short of ammunition. So then I went over to Jane's section. Jane wasn't getting very much action, so I got a box of his 303 ammunition for the Brens and the rifles, and I was carrying it up here. I told Kirk to stay here, keep on contact with the battalion, with Medlin. And as I was moving up here, I saw someone coming towards me. Oh, I said, "What's the guy coming to get the ammunition?" The Chinese, and I could see him through the murk. And he threw a bowling pin grenade, hit me in the chest, and bounced off. I say, "Do I go left? Do I go right?" So I threw myself to the right. It was the right way to go. It was on the left. Boom. So I just...
So you're having a good
I
night.
went the right way. I had a 50% chance. Sounds good. Anyway, so then the guy that was supposed to get the ammunition then showed up and shot the Chinese soldier who threw the grenade at me. So he kind of paid the price. I got the only thing found in my British battle jet thing. I didn't feel anything, but it was shredded in my left armpit, and then it was a bit stiff. Never paid any attention to it at all. Years later, I found out that I had a pack of shrapnel, of needle-set shrapnel. I didn't even know it. It moved down to my ankle.
Really?
It was spotted when I was getting an X-ray for a problem I was having with my leg, and they saw this package of needle-like stuff there. I said, "What's that?" It was shrapnel. It wasn't a lot, but yeah. So I didn't even know. I thought I might have torn it going to the barbed wire when we pulled out. I didn't even know it. So, anyways, one of those weird things. So, anyways, I got the ammunition there. I got back to my position again, and then they were coming. They were really building up. The whistles were going. The bugles were going. The machine guns were firing. See, they accepted my invitation. That's what somebody said to me once. They said, "We should have invited the." They might not have come. Anyway, so Sylvie said, "It's a big one. They're really going to come in now." So I went back down with Sylvie, and I was calling the fire down, and then I said, "Hold, guys, hold, wait," until you saw that picture. Till we saw them coming up. Wait. And as soon as they broke out of the gloom, then I yelled in the old British Army fire. And we let go all the way. And then that with the artillery, bang, hammering that, and it stopped them. There, that time. But we were lucky, but it was this. So it was saying like when I remember hold, and they held until I said that I yelled.
When did
fire.
Rockingham contact you?
It's about that time when I reported this last major attack, and I knew I had a lot of casualties. I didn't know how many quite at that point. My stretcher bearer Jim Sharp, a marvelous guy, was running, talk about risking your neck, back around to the various positions looking after the wounded, putting on first aid badges. In fact, Doc Stevenson said after it was all over, he couldn't have done a better job than Doc did in the middle of all that. So I said, I don't know. I called for a mic target. I said, look, the next one we won't be able to hold. So I'll get everybody down. So hit us. And they said, no, not yet. No. That was metal and didn't want to because he was afraid we'd get too many more killed, hurt. So, and it was at that point that suddenly I heard, this is Big Sunray. That wasn't Keaton, it was Blake Rockingham. He said, Ed, you got to hold. You're the cork in the bottle. I'll do the best I can, sir. So, so after on the mic thing, I just said I was almost off ammunition, no more grenades, almost out of ammunition, completely out of ammunition. I didn't even have 9mm slugs for my. I picked up from one of the Chinese chaps here. I picked up his Torgev. I picked up his burp gun. I was using it, plus a bandolier full of magazines that I tucked over my head, and that's what I was firing, which almost got me killed because Gillette saw this fire coming, and he thought it was, hey, Ozzy, it's me. It's okay.
So the fire coming out of the burp gun is going to sound different, but it's also going to
appear
differently?
The flash eliminator blows out the sides.
Oh, okay.
You see, he's got a box in front of it.
It's got the cooling barrel.
Yeah. So you know it's so it was so he thought it was firing. I was firing over his head at these people. Got this thing coming here. So anyways, I said, no, it's okay, Ozzy, it's me. And so I went, and I had about a dozen magazines in this satchel that this Chinese soldier had been carrying. So then Medlin got on the blower to me. He said, do you think you could pull out? Do you think you'd get out? I said, I'm not going out. So I said, do you think you could box me out? So he spoke to the fool. He said, yeah, okay. So a box would be like that. I said, fine. I said, I'll get them organized and we'll start pulling out. And this is about 4 o'clock in the morning now. They knew then it'd soon be first light and they could bring in a massive airstrike. So we had done the job. They held them off long enough to stop anything coming. By not taking us out by midnight, it kind of ruined things for them, or at least 1 o'clock. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any point. So, so what I did, I got hold of the corporals, and Johnson, incidentally, during this effort, Johnson used the Bren, keeping them off here, but the Bren started to jam from the fantastic usage. And the first one to go was Eddie Bauer. So he ran with his Bren gun through the hail of fire, gave it to Jack and Eddie, took his Bren gun, ran back, stripped it, cleaned it with gasoline, lubricated it, and reassembled it and ran it back. And he did that on every one of these positions. That's why I recommended him for the military medal, which he got. I hardly knew him. He had been nothing but a troublemaker in Japan, but he was for 3 days. That's all I saw. I had with him. I knew very little about him. But there was a little bit of resentment about, hey, we hardly knew this guy. I said, but wait a minute. We wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for Johnson. We knew about those Brins. We would have been finished. So, and Eddie Bauer, Eddie watched a group of Chinese come up to the wire with Bangalores. They're long bamboo. Their Bangalores were long, hollowed out bamboo efforts filled with explosive. Shoved them on the wire, a bare 40 feet away from him. Watched them, and waited till they blew. They blew about an 8-foot hole in the wire, and as they rushed, he just started going ta 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 ta. He filled it. He filled that gap. We were trying to climb over each other. Ta 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 ta. Fantastic guy. I mean, you know, I mean, talk about this little guy that you saw there. You know, I mean, talk about guts. But that saved the day. It saved the they were just swept up through us. There nothing to stop them. Nothing to stop them. That Eddie did. And Jack, of course, he's doing his job too with his Sten gun. And so you know, I knew then I had about half the platoon were down, at least half. So I got Sharp. I said, get them together. And I said, Jack, I want you to make sure this is clear. I want you to clear that out. And Sharp, get them together, get them to help one another, but move them out. And James, the people that he had were actually the ones that were going to escort them out. And this is where Campo got killed. Campo one of his jobs was to protect the wounded, and when some Chinese came up, he stopped them, but they shot him. They killed him. We found him the next day when I went back in the morning at 6:30 in the morning with Eggs Miller's platoon. Eggs had come up the night before to take over the platoon, one platoon. He was still hanging on his rifle, hanging in his bunk, because I wanted to bring him back myself. He was my man.
So you're going out now. These guys managed to make the wall.
Okay, because the defensive fire task had been so successful, they had really hammered the hell out of these people here, between Eddie and the artillery. So Jack, I said, so what I said to who, box us out, and I said, starting off with here, and down the valley, and down this valley, and here. And I said, I'll call when to drop as we move back. Because I said, so I had Baker, who took over one of the Bren guns. He wasn't a Bren gunner per se, but he took, yes, I'm sorry, you changed. Baker was with change, of course. I took Baker with me and Kirkpatrick, and Kirk had a Sten gun, and I had the Torgev Mark III, the burp gun. So I said, Sharp, get them together. He got them together as a bunch. Those wounded in the legs were helped by those that had been wounded in the upper body. And they were sort of supporting and carrying each other, also supported by the small group of men from James's section to get them out. Jack, I moved with Jack down. I said, okay, Jack, I want you to go through and get them up the ridge and get them back 600 yards to get back to the main company. Incidentally, that to the main company from here is 600 yards, and to Hill 166 in a straight line is 800 yards, roughly, 900 yards. Not too far away. Oh, well, far enough when you have to go up. When you consider you have to go up stuff like that, and
no, we're familiar with those.
With guys that are in real, and carrying your weapons, bringing your weapons out, not throwing your weapons away stuff. You go out, you fight your way out. So anyways, so Jack's job was to break through in case there was anything left here. But as he would, and to get to this wire, although it was blasted, a lot of guys got badly scratched just going to the wire. That's what I thought had happened to me in the armpit. But when we got here, we saw Jack. I was just talking to Jack and telling him to get going, and Chinese setting up a machine gun here. I saw 3. Somebody said there were more, but anyways, so I said we've got to get that. They weren't going to shoot at Jack Sargent, right? They're going to shoot at the wounded. So we rushed the machine gun and took it out. And so that did away with that, because they were in the wire. They were all over. Oh, incidentally, I forgot, before I moved down here, when I got here, I couldn't find my signaler, Kirkpatrick. I said, where the hell's Kirk? And so I went back up, and there I saw somebody standing on top of my command post. I thought, that must be Kirkpatrick. Then 2 more guys standing beside him. I took them out, you know.
So they were going to kill him?
Well, they were. I think they wanted to capture me. I don't know, but they're trying to get somebody. But there, it's, yeah, I thought it was Kirkpatrick, but Kirkpatrick was behind me. He said, "I'm here, sir. I'm here, sir." Thank God, because I needed him. He's to signal. Anyways, that took care of that bit of a problem. And then we took care of that bit of a problem. One of my guys, named Barry, jumped on the back of one of the Chinese. They were swarming on the mission, drove him to the ground, and using a 36 grenade, smashed his head in on the ground.
Well, I can see your adrenaline must be a little high at this point.
It's incredible. Not just one case. Anyway, so Jack moved through here, cleared whatever there was there. The wounded started moving out to the wire, gaps in the wire, and I, with Kirkpatrick and Baker, started calling. I called down the chutes and the guns here and at the side, so they wouldn't come at our side, in the side that they were there. And I moved down to the end of the position, and I kept on, drop 50. We saw them starting to move down here. So Baker with his Bren gun, we just kept firing. And then I said, I killed again as we moved further up the ridge. I figured, estimated 50 yards. I say, okay, drop 50. Drop 50. Wham, 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 until we got close to our position, and then we that was the company quartermaster sergeant, company sergeant major, was there waiting for us to usher us through. Then the wounded were ferried down to the MO at the battalion headquarters, and we took up a position on the hill in case there were more coming in. But they obviously had enough, and for the rest of the next couple of hours, we could hear them carrying or taking the wounded, or the dead and the wounded away. And they left about 40 or more, 45 behind, dead, 5 wounded prisoners. Where we picked up the next morning. Next morning at 6:30, Eggs Miller had come up the night before to take over one platoon, because one platoon officer had to be evacuated earlier after the 14th show, and he had a problem. And anyway, so Eggs took over the platoon. So with those few guys you see loading gun, we moved back to the position to get Campo, because we knew Campo was dead, because James told me he'd been killed. So we moved to get back to get Campo, and then we saw the mess, and there were, as I say, moaning Chinese wounded, dead, hanging on the wire in the hole where about was. And he'd taken some of them away, obviously, because there were more there. There were a lot more there than when he did the job. And they had taken some of these away, some of the ones that I've been involved with. They'd gone, they'd taken away. And matter of fact, it was reported by an air observer that they saw a stretcher line, or a line of almost a mile long, carrying people moving back to 166. So, and the prisoners, when they were interrogated, said that we had faced a full battalion. I guess 700-800 people, and the tactics here, which worked so wonderfully well, by calling the defensive fire task down the way it was able to, you separated the support away. You weren't dealing with 800 guys at any one time, or even 300. The last attack here was these two attacks were at least 300 people, at least. But you cut off the
It's like
support.
in First World War, they used to cut off no man's land. They couldn't get guys across to support the guys who got into the trench.
That's right. That's right. It's like almost.
So what
like
was your
first
reaction the next morning going in? You've been pretty tight with these guys for a long time.
I was heartbroken. I cried.
Oh, I can imagine.
I finally sat down and cried.
It's
It was all over. When I got back, oh my God, where do you get such men? I cried. I owe it to And I believe I'm the last one now. The last one left. So I owe
Well,
it.
these guys were amazing. This is an
I
amazing
don't know.
action.
But that, anyways, it was quite 8.5 hours for the battle.
You said afterwards you didn't get as close to people after this.
No, when reinforcements came up, and I just didn't want to get the feel towards them the way I did. Oh, I wasn't indifferent, but I mean, I had one young chap come up. It was sad. Came up, and I was going to be taking out a patrol from the outpost, and a small one, and over here, worlds, and this young guy has just come up. You know, he had one of the RCR scarves on. He looked really nice, really smart. Wow, that looked like a soldier. And anyways, and he was had to be present when I was briefing the guys about what to do and what now. And he said, "Can I go with you, sir?" I said, "No, you've got a lot to learn first." I said, "No." I said, "But I want to go, sir." I said, "Why?" "I want to get me a Chinaman." I said, "Oh my God." You know, I said, "Oh no." Well, anyhow, I can remember his face when another patrol went out with Carm Darling. And Carm came back with 2 dead corporals, Steer and the other one, don't want to forget his name. McCormick, I think his name was. He's a very fine guy. A wonderful corporal.
They were ambushed?
Oh, well, McCormick and Steer, yeah. They're there. Anyway, he'd taken out this patrol just shortly after this new man came up. And he got ambushed. He had the 2 corporals, one on each side. They were in whites, and he stood up, and he was just at the entrance here, and fired both sides. The bullets crossed in front of him, hit Steer and McCormick. Missed him miraculously. Anyway, they brought him down the hill, and McCormick was a big man. And by pulling him down the hill, he actually was almost his clothes torn off him. But took 4 men to bring him back. That's one thing. When you have a casualty, when I was in the Scouts, you get somebody hit, it takes 4 men to take a man out, to bring him back home. Yeah. So anyways, but Carm carried, who was the smaller man, he carried Steer, and Steer had been shot to the lungs, and was still alive, and bleeding all over him. You know, he looked like a butcher when he came up. I went down to help him bring Steer into the position. And this new guy, his eyes were like the size of saucers. And I looked at him, and it was a cool thing to say. And I said, "You're going to get your chance." He was just sitting there terrified, seeing these two dead guys. We couldn't find out where McCormick couldn't find anything on him. I said, he was dead. But I couldn't find, there was no blood. And then finally, I noticed underneath his left nipple, a hole. One single 7.62 slug had gone under his nipple and through his heart. And this huge man, taller than you, handsome guy, did her. It was almost unbelievable, you know. And I couldn't find out how he'd been killed.
Ask you too about that thing. You said you slept with your pistol.
When I got back to Toronto, they flew us home. And then train stepped a few days in Vancouver, and then home by train. Well, Toronto was sort of aware there was a Korean War on, so there was a bit of, there was people there, newspapers and what have you. But in other areas, they weren't too aware, and these guys didn't get much of a reception. But anyways, so I was on 60 days leave, and one of the top Chinese restaurants in Toronto used to be at 22.5 Elizabeth Street. So they decided it would take me for a Chinese dinner. I sat there, and I was almost in a cold sweat because, I thought to myself, I had so been inured,
Yes.
because whether I'm patrolling, whether I could smell kimchi, because that's one of the things they love to eat with garlic and chili peppers and so forth, and that had a very strong smell. Anyways, I never felt so comfortable in my life. But on top of that, when I went to bed for the first number of months, I had to have, and it was my trusty Luger, I had to have a gun beside me. I couldn't sleep because I never went to sleep. Never went.
Was it
A
loaded?
little bit of sleep.
Did you know? Did you leave it loaded, or was it?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know.
Doesn't help you when you're dating.
No, no. Well, I was, funny. Yeah, it doesn't make much for a romantic life. But ask my wife.